Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast, where power, politics, and the world's most coveted materials collide. Rare earth elements power the backbone of tomorrow's most critical technologies. With China dominating global production, the U.S. and its allies must align strategically to ensure a stable future. This urgency prompted tech entrepreneurs Daniel O'Connor and Dustin Olson to launch Rare Earth Exchanges, a news and insight platform built to equip stakeholders and decision makers with the tools and intelligence needed to reduce dependency and build prosperous resilience. Let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. You're joined by me, Dustin, my co-host Daniel, and our guest this week is Anurag, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Gradiant. And it is an MIT-founded $1 billion water technology company and has recently expanded into extracting critical minerals from a first-of-a-kind facility doing battery-grade lithium from oil-filled produced water in Pennsylvania. So Anurag, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Dustin. Doing great, and great to be here on this discussion.
Absolutely. So I'm intrigued. You've caught my attention. So you're pulling critical minerals out of waste from oil fields that is viable enough for battery technology. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have, in fact, demonstrated production of battery-grade lithium from this produced water from our site in Pennsylvania.
That's honestly amazing. So can you kind of just walk us down the path that it led to this discovery with all your experience in just water technology?
Yeah, so I'll preface the story by saying that lithium extraction from brines is a glorified water treatment problem, and Gradiant has spent the last almost decade and a half, almost 13 years, really developing new fundamentals, fundamentally new solutions and technologies in the industrial water treatment and recycling space. So we started out of MIT with one technology, which was my co-founder's PhD work at the time. And over the years, we became an end-to-end water management, water solution provider to our industrial clients. What that meant was we not only, of course, developed and commercialized that first technology, which was over on the brine concentration side, but we invented and developed multiple proprietary technologies across the water value chain. So when you treat water, there are multiple steps involved: pre-treatment, disinfection, potentially membrane desalination. If you go even further, you're talking about concentrating further that brine, right? So brine concentration, zero liquid discharge, where you ensure that no liquid goes out, and all the way and including solids treatment. So we had been operating in various industrial settings, starting, initially from energy to power to mining, more recently in the AI infrastructure world, so semiconductor and data centers, which is frankly where most of our growth and momentum is coming from right now. But as we were looking at this science, this chemistry of water, of various types of water that had various kinds of dissolved solids in it, in different types of salts, and frankly even some resources, we got pulled into the lithium extraction world about 4 or 5 years ago now. But that was solely because of our brine concentration technology. So if you look at lithium extraction from brines, which, by the way, is a huge potential value because most of the world's lithium is in fact in brines and not in the clay, the way it's been traditionally mined. When you take these brine solutions, they're very dilute solutions of the lithium. So first thing you have to do, you have to make it lithium rich, meaning you have to remove the lithium from all the other stuff that's in it. And then you have to concentrate it, right? So you have to remove water from this brine, from the solution, so that what's left behind becomes more and more concentrated, and therefore easier to take that lithium salts out of it and produce it and get a commodity of value. So from where we were looking, concentrating this lithium stream was really just a water treatment problem, right? We concentrate brines when we recover pure water from it, whether it's in a water that's, produced water, or water that's coming out of industrial waste, water that's coming from semiconductor fabs, water that's left after evaporation from the data centers. When you remove water, you're concentrating what's left. It so happens in the case of brines that have critical minerals that what's left is more valuable from a dollar value standpoint than the water that we're pulling out. So again, from a scientific standpoint, it really was a water treatment problem for us. It just so happens that in this case, you end up extracting lithium. So once we got into it, as a company, we've always taken this end-to-end approach because we're problem solvers at the end of the day, and solving a part of the problem is not good enough for Gradient. So we fix the entire problem. And when we looked at lithium, fixing the entire problem, delivering the end-to-end solution meant developing our own DLE, that first step in the process, combining that with our concentration technology, which is how we got pulled into the first place, and then being able to finally recover the battery grade lithium from that concentrated brine. So that ended up being the evolution of Gradient, also becoming an end-to-end lithium refiner, which is a business now, one part of the business that we're very excited about. Long answer to your question, but I wanted to make it comprehensive.
I think it's helpful and honestly very interesting. So I would like to just get your take really quick too. So water has been a big part of the mining operation and how they extract a lot of things. And so do you guys deal with a lot of that too as part of just kind of the remediation of
Yeah. So we
wastewater?
had been working for mining customers even before we got into the DLE space. We had been cleaning wastewater from mining operations. We'd been cleaning tailings ponds, water, that sits in tailings ponds after the usage from the mine. And at least in a couple of cases, we were in fact recovering minerals from that wastewater. So we were in fact recovering nickel from the wastewater of one of the mining companies well before we were in the DLE space or had developed this end-to-end solution. And we continue to do that. So whether it's copper mining, nickel mining, even in some places uranium mining, we continue to do that wastewater treatment and recycling application.
That's awesome.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say congratulations on your round of financing. It's quite a substantial round, and you guys are getting pretty big. So congratulations. First of all, building $1 billion corporation is not easy. So impressive. When you look at this market space we have a spectrum of viewer here and community member at our website. For lithium, where you get into DLE and lithium, what's the issue today? Most of the lithium today is separated or processed, refined out of China today. We understand why that happens with rare earth elements. It's a very unique set of circumstances that sort of evolved that way. In this case, is it similar? Like could you give us just a brief overview, cliff note overview of why lithium production has evolved the way it has, just for a bigger picture context?
So this is how I will explain it to you. And I honestly, on why lithium is produced in certain places and in a certain way today, I'm not the world expert on. But look, there was a time when US was the world leader in lithium extraction. There was also the time when lithium wasn't needed in the world in such large quantities, right? And over time, it wasn't, from my understanding, it wasn't really where the deposits were or where the mining was happening, but rather where the processing started happening. And I mean, and really, like, there's no better way to describe it, that China took the lead on that refining step, setting up refining capabilities. In some ways, before lithium became a far more valuable commodity than it was, say, 4 decades ago. And of course, the traditional methods of mining lithium are rather energy intensive and are rather environmentally disruptive. So that's also, I mean, much like several other industries, quite a bit of the environmentally disruptive industry moved to Asia and specifically to China. So that is, in my understanding, a big part of the reason. And then, before we knew it, China was producing by far the most lithium and even other critical minerals versus anyone else in the world.
So, and thank you. I appreciate that. And exactly the level I want to at least look at this problem. And if you look at separation, or DLE, as you call it, is there not at least a couple different categories of how you pull or separate the lithium, and what's different about your methodology and your technology?
So look, I mean, there is the brine mining and then there's the traditional mining. So the traditional mining is coming from the clay, the rock, where it ends up being actually the brine deposits are the majority of the lithium deposit in the world. And two, the traditional method of mining is, like we were discussing earlier, rather environmentally disruptive. Now, when you come to brines, if you just take brine, you drill for the lithium brines, the traditional way to remove lithium salts from there would be to put it in evaporation ponds, which again becomes quite environmentally disruptive because you need a lot of land for this, and you need a lot of water for the mining process itself, right, to pull it out in the first place. What we are doing here is we are condensing all of that area that is needed for brine ponds or evaporation ponds, essentially, into a much more compact brine concentration system, which does a few things, right? One, it reduces the area requirement by over 95%. I'd like to say 99%, but that's not entirely true in every setting. It reduces the time to process, which used to be in weeks and months, to really seconds to minutes, because it becomes a continuous process. And in the process of refining the lithium, in the process of extracting lithium, we are actually recovering the water as well, which then is recycled back into the operation. So remember where I started with, right, that extraction of lithium from the brine is a glorified water treatment problem. Yeah. So part of this, we are also still treating the water. So you're cutting down your water consumption, you're cutting down the area needed to accomplish this, you're cutting the time from, weeks or months to minutes, really, and you are cutting down the energy consumption massively. Because, one may argue, look, we're just putting the water out there, it's just evaporating. Okay, that's fine, but you need to create those ponds, you need to line the land, that's not without energy consumption and material consumption, and it's very high energy consumption. So doing what we are doing, you're cutting down on all of that. And the goal is, and not the goal, in fact, demonstrated, is not just that this becomes a much more environmentally sustainable practice, but also far more economically viable than it would be otherwise.
So basically, you can come in using this methodology and system, and you can get better more productive results, more cleaned, and so productive, safe, better for the environment. It sounds like it's a home run. And where are you at in the adoption? So if we looked at the lithium brine operations worldwide, how are you positioned? I'm assuming your technology is pretty unique, patent pending.
Yeah, in many cases patented, yeah, approved, and some pending as well. We like
So
to say Gradient's IP portfolio is both young and mature. Young because we still have a lot of years left on those patents, but mature because more than half of our claims are actually already allowed.
no, that's great. Like, I guess, how do you fit into the ecosystem? I mean, how competitive is it for the lithium-based market? Sorry, for the brine-based lithium market, are you like a market leader now? What is that landscape? We have a lot of investors that come to
Yeah.
this show, so it's important for them to understand
Yeah.
where you fit in.
So in some ways, Daniel, it's early days in the sense that they're really, even though there's so much promise and so much effort has gone into this, brine mining for lithium isn't being done at scale right now.
Interesting.
If we look back a few years, there were a lot of hopes that by now we would be producing lithium from brines at large scale, but several of those projects have been delayed for various reasons, whether it's permitting, whether it's environmental pressures, whether it's even price of lithium fluctuating. It will happen, but it's all been pushed back several years. Where we are coming from is we are actually, at least for our initial production, we are producing lithium from our own site, from our own water that we own. We own the title to this water. We are not seeking drilling permits. We are not looking to deploy CapEx and OpEx into bringing this brine from under the ground to above the ground. So that cuts our time to market by several years, frankly. Even traditionally, mining projects are long-term projects, right? When we first started working for our mining customers, people said, "Oh, it's going to be 10 years before you deploy something." I mean, it wasn't 10 years, but yes, it did take several years to deploy something. Here, where we are is, if you think of our lithium business, it is really a mining business, except here we have the water that we need to process, or we have the brine stream that we need to process. So the lithium's already there. In a way, it's already there. We have to refine it. So it becomes much more from a mining operation to a refining operation, which is inherently faster. And the technology is there. The technology is demonstrated some scale, so lab scale and field scale. What we are next doing, hopefully within the next 12 months, operating at commercial scale and selling this lithium. In terms of, there is this universe. So we talked originally about the universe of conventional lithium mining, and then now
Right.
brine-based lithium mining. We're not the only ones who are exploring the brine mining of lithium. There are others, but today, Gradient's one of the few, if not the only one, that is bringing that end-to-end solution from, established leadership in the first step of the process to our globally known water treatment and brine concentration capabilities, and then the last step of actually producing it, having our site not just identified but purchased and owned, having that stream of brine that is about to be processed already showing up at our site. Traditionally we were treating it, to recycle the water. Now we're
Right.
treating it to recover the lithium.
Which, I was just going to say, which is a great addition to your business, right? I mean, it's fabulous. So what I hear you saying is that it's still early days and that there's a lot of growth coming with.
Absolutely. And you mentioned in addition to the business, Daniel, we are actually taking this business and spinning off into its own company called Alkali. That's because while from a technological standpoint, it's very similar to what we do in water treatment, from a business standpoint, it's really a mining business, not a water business.
Right, which makes sense. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It makes sense. It is you are upstream. If we take the traditional upstream, midstream, downstream, and remember what we do with the rare earth elements are we have a system of looking at the assets as a system, not just mines. We look at upstream, mining, midstream, separation, refining, metallization in the case of rare earth, downstream, magnet production or other forms of production. So yes, so I could see that you spin off that company and you focus on lithium mining. I don't know enough about the market. I have
Lithium and critical minerals, lithium is the first step, but
right.
eventually our target would be the larger critical mineral market. But again, to your point, Daniel, right, the idea is to create that focus on what is fundamentally a different business from what we're doing in the industrial water treatment world, and therefore give it the best shot of success.
And just on that note, could you just talk about some other critical minerals that your process would be highly relevant to and where you could add a lot of value? Could you give us some examples?
I would just add right away nickel and copper to it, especially as I gave you the example, even before we got into lithium, we were recovering nickel for one of our customers, two of our customers actually. So nickel and copper would be right on the heels of it. But obviously, a big part of executing something successfully is focus. And today and for the next, I would say, several months to 1 year or so, we're laser focused on producing lithium from our first site.
Got it. Got it. Dustin, I have a few more questions, but please jump in.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the alkali facility that you just mentioned here. So you've described it as a fully integrated facility, which involves a lot of steps. So I'd be curious to get your take on how this is genuinely different from other facilities out there trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. So, for one, I'll give you an example of another project that we worked on ourselves, but we were only part of the solution. So the concentration step, the middle step, actually there were 4 steps. So before the brine goes into the DLE, there is a pre-treatment of it too, because you can't send it through the DLE before pre-treating it for certain contaminants and impurities. So Gradiant actually sat at the far upstream of this train. Then came the DLE step, which wasn't ours. Frankly, at that time, we weren't fully ready, but also the end user already had a partnership with another company. So the DLE was another company's process. And then came the concentration, which is again where Gradient sat. And then the final step of recovering the salt from the concentrated solution was a third company. So there were actually 3 companies involved, with Gradient being in 2 of the steps and the other 2 being in 1 step each. And that project happened and was proven out. The results were good, but it didn't really scale as of yet. So I think part of it was there were some unresolved technological challenges in the entire 4 or 5 step process. And part of it wasn't one entity sort of overseeing the entire process. So why we are different at this site versus some of the others that are trying to do it, we believe our DLE is significantly better than and when what does better mean, right? Better really means two things: efficiency and cost effectiveness. In the water world, or even more so in the commodity world, a better process means it is more efficient and more cost effective, right? You can't have like, oh, I have a better process, but it's more expensive kind of a thing. So the concentration step, which is where a large amount of the energy consumption goes in, and which is what truly determines the efficiency, Gradient is a global leader in that. And as we have been, shown from our track record in the industrial water side, today Gradient has more membrane-based brine concentrators installed around the world than any other company, and that's a fact. So it just comes down to, in the end, our process being more energy efficient and therefore more cost effective. And it comes down to us controlling the end-to-end process, not relying on other companies and vendors to supplement. And number three, by owning the site and having the brine already there, ready to process, we are cutting down the permitting and the planning part of the process by leaps and bounds.
Makes a lot of sense, truly. So, kind of a follow-up question to that is you need people to recognize the value that you bring to the table. So, speaking of water, that's kind of your feedstock for a lot of what you do. And a lot of these operations probably have viewed water as a waste disposal problem, not necessarily as a feedstock haven. So, how are you've got the process, but how are you flipping the narrative so that people look at the water waste as a value asset and not something that is an expense to get rid of?
So it's a really, really good question, Dustin. You're right. Water has often been thought of as either a waste stream, or even on the front end as something that's taken for granted, right? Like, oh, you turn the tap on, water comes out. So traditionally, the value of water has been quite elusive. And, my co-founder says it's no one else's fault but ours that we started a water treatment company. But I mean, I joke, we've been from the very beginning focused on, in fact, creating that value of water, creating the respect for water, and then doing it in an economically viable way so that it doesn't get sidelines like, oh yeah, great, but too expensive kind of a thing. But what has happened is it's not us flipping the script, but two things. One, the value and criticality of water has become more and more evident as the pressure on water resources has become higher, right? With all the advanced manufacturing that we're seeing. I mean, these days, right, with all the chips consuming the water, with all the AI consuming so much water, it has really become a public discussion. It wasn't this way even 10 years ago. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation on water a decade ago because it wasn't, front and center in people's mind. But today it is. And by doing what Gradient has done over the last decades, and we've done it for some of the very largest companies in the world, is we have proven that you can look at water not as a liability, but as a resource, because treating it, recycling it, recovering resource from it can be done in an economically viable way. And so when you start looking at your wastewater not as a liability but as a resource, you also realize you control your own destiny. If you can recycle 99% of the water that you would have otherwise thrown away, you are taking only one water from the public water supply. So now you control your source water, you control what's happening to your wastewater. In essence, you control your water destiny. And we have, explained the message that, look, controlling your water destiny means controlling your business destiny, because you're shielded from what may happen if policy changes, if public perception changes, if droughts happen, right? If there's a drought, who's going to get off first is the industry, not the homes and the farmers, right? So by seeing that you can treat and recycle and manage water economically and efficiently, and by doing so, you control your not just environmental sustainability, but business sustainability, I think it is automatically making that case, as is evidenced, at least, in our other business. I mean, take, for example, our AI infrastructure business, largely semiconductors and data center. It is at historic momentum right now. So I think that case for water, at least in some sectors, is already made, partly because the market dynamics have made everyone realize that, and partly because we came along and we demonstrated to customers that they can do this without spending an arm and a leg and while controlling their water destiny.
That really impressive, though, how this is evolving and it's going to become much more comprehensive and impactful, very much so. So, to the extent you can, just so we can get a sense of what a project looks like, do you have a pipeline of lithium projects in the queue where you're going to activate and take them live in terms of the mining and refining side? Is that something you can talk about?
So, I mean, obviously, I can't name names here,
Of course, yeah.
but we are in discussions with several potential partners.
Hmm.
We do believe, however, again, coming back to that focus, right, the capabilities and the commercial viability of it almost becomes self-evident when we start selling our own lithium. So that's the goal. But that said, we want to set the stage for the next step of what happens after we're producing and selling the lithium. And we are in various discussions, mostly in the US, but also some in other parts of the world.
Okay. Okay. And obviously, yeah, the producing your own lithium, I mean, as far as lithium, and again, we haven't covered
So
that
we
as
like to take this approach, Daniel, even when we took the approach with our water treatment business, when we came up with something really cool, something that was really valuable, we didn't try to sell it to someone who can then install it in their own full system. We decided we will build the entire system, right? And therefore, we were able to go to the end user, which is the semiconductor fab or the data center or the pharma company. Same way here, by taking our destiny in our hands, we're not trying to sell piece or this piece to someone who's going to put a process around it and figure out the permitting. We are actually going to use what we have in an end-to-end solution to produce the lithium and then go directly to the end user of the lithium, which are the battery manufacturers, for example, or the car manufacturers, for example.
no, it's very exciting. I mean, you become the means of production. I mean, you become the total value chain pretty much. And then it's about connecting, to your point, with the market, with the OEMs or the automobile companies, the battery companies. Yeah, that's a big deal. Very big deal.
This is a big deal. So, one final question for you, Anurag, is where do you hope to see the company in 5 years with this new facility and other ventures that you guys have going on?
So, look, I think on the lithium side, in 5 years, I definitely see us producing lithium at not one, but multiple sites. And of course, our initial focus is in the producing lithium from produced water, from oil field produced water. But there are other brines out there that this is just as applicable to. So producing lithium and being one of the world's foremost brine-based lithium miner really out there. On the rest of it, look, the rest of Gradient outside of Alkali is today, for lack of a better phrase, becoming the water layer behind this AI economy. We are providing source water, treating the wastewater for semiconductor fab. We're providing source water, treating the wastewater, managing the cooling loops for data centers. That is extremely critical, and it is only growing. So I think if, Gradient is the water layer that forms the backbone of the AI economy, and if Alkali is the leading brine-based producer of critical minerals, I think we would have made some headway along achieving our mission. I don't know
Absolutely.
if we'll ever fully achieve it. Grand goals are often never fully met, but that's okay. You strive to achieve them every day.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And honestly, this discussion has got me looking at water a little bit differently. And I would imagine a lot of our listeners are probably feeling the same way. So if somebody would like to reach out to you or someone at your company, where's the best place to go?
I mean, they can reach out to us. There's a contact page on our website. I'm sure they can find us on LinkedIn. Feel free. I mean, we're always all ears to questions, suggestions, people who are excited and want to make a difference, because we need inspired people on our team as well to help accomplish these goals.
Absolutely. Well, Anurag, thank you so much for being on our podcast and sharing your insights and more about your business and the processes you guys are developing with us. It's truly mind blowing. It's really exciting what you guys are doing.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for such an enjoyable discussion.